India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi begins his visit to Poland. First time in 45 years that a leader of India is visiting Poland. Ahead lie opportunities for greater cooperation, but also there is the looming issue of geopolitics, as the subsequent visit in Ukraine may actually prove to be pivotal to the perception of the way India actually approaches the ongoing conflict. So, will these issues stand in the way of the possible opportunities of cooperation between Poland and India? We're going to ask our guests today. Tomasz Łukaszuk, research scientist at the University of Warsaw, and Swaran Singh, professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Swaran Singh, can you tell us more about what opportunities lie ahead, especially since, as I've already mentioned, the last time a leader of India visited Poland was 45 years ago. That was during the era during which Poland was still a communist country, part of the Soviet bloc. So things have changed indeed. What are the opportunities which now a closer cooperation between Poland and India could bring for the near future?
Thank you for having me on your program. I think India and Poland share a very important economic relationship and also defense cooperation. And in both these areas, I think there will be several MOUs and initiatives that will take relationship forward. And there could be also exploration of other avenues. What makes Poland unique for India among European countries that India is primarily engaged with is that Poland was never an imperial power for India. The relationship included most of the from 17th century onward, we had visitors, we had artists of Poland, Indologists of Poland coming here, and of course various missionaries and of course royal noble family people coming here. So very strong but social and cultural and of course commercial relationship for a long period of time. You mentioned Poland at some stage being a communist country. I want to very quickly mention that during the Second World War, India, great leaders of India were very vocal in criticizing both the German invasion and Soviet occupation. Later, of course, India also grew closer to Soviet Union, and so also Poland was close friend of Soviet Union, and that again brought them on similar platform. After collapse of Cold War, again India was looking for new relationship with the Western nations and United States. So was the Democratic Republic of Poland. So there were also opportunities to build relationship closer together. India had Polish consulates and embassies before India became independent in Mumbai, in Calcutta, in Amritsar. So it's a very different kind of relationship that doesn't have any irritants in the relationship. And I think what is important in this visit is how Poland has been a very important frontline state in dealing with Ukraine crisis, and when India wants to engage with that issue of how can Ukraine crisis be resolved, I think the first stop of Indian Prime Minister in Poland is a very significant step in that sense, and I'm sure it will contribute to the outcomes that Prime Minister will have in Kiev.
So which brings us to expect from the upcoming visit in Kiev? We know that the recent talks between Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi sparked some outrage in Ukraine. President Zelensky himself said he was disappointed that a leader of the world's biggest democracy should embrace a war criminal, that is Vladimir Putin. So, of course, there is some bad blood there, but do you think that this can actually be resolved, and that perhaps a recent analysis by Foreign Policy magazine may actually indicate that India is delicately trying to signal that it might actually be changing its stance a little bit by, of course, having Prime Minister Modi visit Ukraine at this very stage. And that is because Russia is becoming more and more of an unreliable partner, and also one that continues to ally itself with China. And naturally, the relationship between China and India is, well, complicated at this stage.
Right, I think in diplomacy we say the best agreements are those where everyone goes home a little unhappy. Because if either of the two sides is the one which is happy, making the other unhappy, then those solutions will not be enduring. So I understand Indian Prime Minister's visit to Moscow made some of the Western nations, including President Zelensky, very upset about the way it was conducted. But so was President Putin. If you remember, the visit took place in such a fashion that on second day some of the meetings did not take place. So there are reasons sometimes how Sergei Lavrov also shows great anger with India. The way India is engaging, for example, in quadrilateral security dialogue in Indo-Pacific. So any power, once it becomes increasingly influential, will have some countries not really in full agreement with what it does, because India cannot be bandwagoning any country, whether it is United States or Russia. So to some extent, both sides are likely to have their own grievances as to how India is engaging and conducting itself. So this visit is clearly a signal to Russia that India is not bandwagoning Russia. India is, as my very esteemed co-panelist mentioned, is pursuing its own strategic autonomy in foreign policy, pursuing its own national interest, largely keeping within the normative frame of rule of law and so on. So in that sense, I think what we can expect from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Kiev is not like the Swiss summit, which is again a one-sided unanimous diktat to Russia, which was boycotted by Russians and Chinese. Neither it is Wang Yi's proposal, 13-point proposal of last year, which was completely demolished by all Western nations. So India is trying to work really snail pace, piecemeal, modest, behind the curtain, to see where India can make, if any, value addition. And that was the language when recently Indian Deputy National Security Advisor visited Kiev to plan for this visit. The Chief of Staff of President Zelensky and the Indian Deputy National Security Advisors used the same language, that India can contribute substantially in the entire peace process efforts that are on the play right now. I hope Indian Prime Minister's statement from Kiev will be a little more specific to give some more clearer idea as to how exactly India is trying to, sort of contribute whatever it can. But I think it's a very piecemeal, modest, behind the curtain approach that India has followed so far, mostly in pursuing peace in so many other episodes also. But I think going to Poland and engaging with Poland itself is also lately also showing a certain fatigue. In fact, entire West, including United States, are showing certain fatigue in supporting Ukraine. They have their own economic problems, and we are aware that the increasing reluctance in Poland makes Poland relatively cautious of unstinted support to Ukraine. And that stage, I think, is perfect, where India can now go and engage with Poland first, and then from there to Kiev. Let me very quickly, last 10 seconds, make a point. India has been constantly also trying to provide humanitarian assistance to Ukraine all these 2.5 years. And if you look at the language India has used with President Putin, one after another meetings, the last meeting in Moscow, Indian Prime Minister said, you cannot conceptualize, think of any peace talks either being in place or becoming effective in the middle of bombing, and that was indication to bombing in Kiev, and he mentioned death of civilians. So Russia also is partly unhappy the way India is conducting itself, but India is for peace. And I think that is the focus India has when Indian Prime Minister visits Kiev, to do some kind of minimalist approach which should be effective rather than do grandstanding, which is going to be at all not effective. Either side is going to be unhappy with that. Where two parties can meet, where two parties can work together is what is being tried by Indian Prime Minister when he goes to Kiev.
And that, I believe, is a fitting conclusion here. What matters is the actual end result. There are different pathways to peace, but if peace is achieved in a way that's satisfactory to especially the aggrieved side, that is Ukraine, then it is certainly worth the effort. Tomasz Łukaszuk and Professor Swaran Singh were our guests today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.